Hello, and welcome to Forget What You Learned, a place for families to stop and reflect on the modern state of education. We empower you to challenge your own thinking about today's traditional school system and ask the question, are my kids thriving? I'm Corey Greenberg, a parent in the trenches just like you, and I chat with innovators, experts, and other parents who are changing the conversation, inspiring families to reevaluate how we define academic success. This podcast is brought to you by Pacific Preparatory and Tutor Corps, sister organizations molding education through innovative one-on-one learning for students in today's digital world. In today's episode, I chat with Sheila Akbar, whose resume reflects a person who has achieved ultimate success within the definition of the word that many parents of school-age kids would covet. I mean, she's got 2 degrees from Harvard and a double PhD. Her career spans Wall Street, the halls of academia, and finally entrepreneurship, where she's found her true passion, helping students and families navigate the college prep experience. Her personal story is a lot more nuanced and involved a lot more growing pains than it might appear, including being raised by immigrant parents who only wanted that piece of paper from Harvard and then only for her to become a doctor. Sheila talks about shedding those parental expectations to find and then have the courage to listen to her inner voice that's guided her to what she defines as success, being energized by and satisfied with what she does every day. I think this is an inspirational story and one that can make us parents look at how we message the idea of success to our kids. Don't miss it. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I have with us Sheila Akbar, President and COO of Signet Education, a full-service education consulting company offering holistic support to teens and their families as they navigate high school and the college admissions process. Sheila's bright and uplifting perspective on college prep is changing the face of what it means to parent through the high school to college years. With a deep belief in the successful partnership of parents and teens, her influence is affecting student after student and family after family to thoughtfully define and then pursue their version of success. She knows what she's talking about, as Sheila's career spans financial services, academia, and entrepreneurship. She holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Harvard University and 2 doctoral degrees from Indiana University. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Corey. So nice to be here with you.
I'm so glad you're here. This last point is kind of where I'd like to start. Before we get into your philosophy at Signet, you've got multiple degrees from these prestigious universities, right? From the outside looking in, you've already reached the pinnacle of what your clients might aspire to. But I know that your personal journey wasn't really a direct line to what you would consider personal success. So spill it.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And while you're reading that, I'm like, I should make sure my parents listen to this because for them, they're still like, it's not enough. It's not enough.
Oh my goodness.
And I've really internalized that voice, probably to my detriment in a lot of ways. But yeah, it definitely was not a straight line. I grew up in a family of immigrants in a small town in Michigan. And it was made clear to me very early on that the only way I could really leave home for college is if I went to Harvard, like specifically Harvard, as if that were just a place I could just go to, right? And I made it happen. I was a really hard worker in school. I am one of those people that's blessed to be just naturally adept at standardized testing and things like that. And I went to Harvard thinking I was going to be a pre-med, and it will probably come as no surprise that my immigrant father was a doctor. And so we expected his children to become doctors as well. And at some point in college, I realized I was not like the other pre-meds who were at Harvard. They were so much more just intense. And they were interested in things like doing research in a lab or getting clinical hours. And I was a very assiduous student, very involved in high school, but like these things never crossed my mind. And even when I was in college, I was like, oh yeah, I guess if I was serious about this, I would be doing those things. And then I had to stop and question, wait, am I serious about this? And I really didn't have a framework for like investigating what I really wanted to do or what my strengths were. And I ended up moving away from the pre-med track. And before I even had the time or space to start to reflect on what I wanted out of my life and career, this whole Wall Street recruiting machine kind of moved into campus, and I got sucked up and into it. Um, and so I did that for a couple of years. I knew as soon as I started, I was like, oh yeah, this is not for me, but it paid well. It was prestigious. It allowed me to have a fun time in New York City. But I knew sooner rather than later, I was going to have to move on and figure myself out. And so I decided to go back to school to study this poetry that I had loved as a teenager. I really think it's the sole reason I got into Harvard was because I wanted to study this really obscure thing. And it was something that stayed with me. I have lots of interests and they come and go like for most people, but poetry is one that has just always stayed with me. So I went back and did a master's and found myself loving that academic life and realizing, oh yeah, when I was 4 or 5, I wanted to be a teacher. And I love literature, even though I was sort of a math science kid for a long time. And I sort of redirected my entire life around becoming an academic. And I went and pursued 2 PhDs, one in comparative literature, one in Near Eastern languages. And I thought that I was going to become a professor. And right as I was finishing my dissertation, I had been tutoring a little bit in LA where I lived for a while, and then Indiana, and then in Boston where I went back to write my dissertation. And that's when I joined Signet, just as a tutor. And there were just a lot of opportunities for me to apply my strengths and insight at Signet. And I had such a great relationship with the founder, who was a friend of mine from college, that he really allowed me to run with those ideas. And I just saw a world open up for me of ways that I, specifically me, could use my strengths and skills to help people. And that felt so rewarding, so much more rewarding than a career as an academic might have been, teaching intro classes and maybe having a couple of grad students who were actually interested in the thing that I was interested in teaching them. So then there was another really big career pivot to becoming an entrepreneur in the education space. And I was able to use a lot of the skills that I learned on Wall Street and in academia to, grow Signet and to help make it better. And so it's an adventure, and it will continue to be an adventure, I'm sure. And looking back at it, I can, on my journey, I can kind of connect the dots and see where my values come up, where these things that I loved as a child come back into my life. And I had no idea that this is how it was going to unfold. And I mentioned my parents. I think that they have felt like this is a roller coaster ride. They're hanging onto the edge of their seat. Like, what is she doing? What is she going to do? It's not what they expected for me. But I'm so happy and I feel really fulfilled by my work.
I could not love that journey anymore. And the term that just kept coming into my mind while I was listening is your inner voice. Like, where was it? I mean, obviously it was present, right? When you said you were 4 and 5 and you had that love of poetry, but then you veered off into the math and science, which I'm guessing was more of that external expectation piece. It's just so interesting to think about all of our kids, how and when and if they're able to listen to that inner voice and then allow it to guide them in their choices. Does that make sense? Like, when you looking back, do you feel like you ignored that inner voice, or was it not even present because of all of those external expectations?
Yeah, I mean, as a young child, of course, I didn't know what an inner voice was.
Yeah.
But I certainly had a strong personality. I was the second child and, the rebellious one.
Hmm.
And my parents,
Hmm.
I think being immigrants in a small town where there were not many other immigrants, were very interested in helping me fit in. And
Hmm.
for them, doing that meant assimilating, doing all the things that other people were doing. And for me, I was just like, well, I'm never going to fit in here. So I should just do the things that I want to do.
Hmm.
Right. Um, and that drive really helped me survive a pretty isolating high school experience, and this transition to one of the most rigorous colleges in the world from a rural high school that really did not prepare me well for it.
Yeah.
But that I guess was my sense of an inner voice at that point. But it really did hit me like a ton of bricks when I decided, when I recognized that I was different from all the other pre-meds, because I had never really thought about my inner voice being different from what my parents wanted for me, even though I was
Yeah.
rebelling in all of these little ways. Like, I mean, what kind of rebel goes to Harvard?
Hmm.
Like, that kind of rebel. That's the kind of rebel I am.
Yeah.
I had lost touch with it, definitely. And I mentioned
Mhm.
that Wall Street recruiting machine. I lost touch with it during that process as well, because it really, it kind of preys on our competitive nature. And it was just like, well, I like winning. And I didn't even think
Mhm.
about what's the prize I'm going to win. Right. So I went
Mhm.
through this really rigorous recruiting process, and, all of the things. If anyone's gone through that process, it's like very intense. And I never stopped to think about, is this my forever career? Is this a good fit for me? Do I like the people that I'm going to be working with? And then first day on the job, all of those things became really clear to me that it was not the place that I needed to be. But there's fear, and there's societal pressure, and my parents, of course, too, being like, we sent you to this great college, and you don't know what you want to do with your life, and you're going to walk away from what kind of paycheck and what kind of glamorous reputation. So it was very hard to stay in touch with my inner voice, or even just listen to it. But there just came a point where I was like, I just can't do this anymore. Other people might be okay with going to a job that just drains their soul on a daily basis. But, I'm too stubborn. I couldn't do it.
There's so much to unpack there, but I think that there's something to be said for, like, when you talk about the Wall Street machine, that was the reality for me on my college campus too, and there's something to be said for prescribed structure if you don't know what you want to do, and
Absolutely.
all that uncertainty that comes with being a college student, especially now today, when I feel like, our parenting model is very, the parents are kind of driving, what our kids are doing in this competitive culture and all of that, which we could talk about in a minute. But then when these kids get to college and they're like, oh, I'm supposed to have this all figured out, like you too. And then there's this, promise of, oh, here's a new structure that, and you said winning. I mean, that's another piece of it. It's like we're in the competition, but we don't understand what the prize is. And you got the prize and it just didn't even fit,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. I mean, I think you summed it up really well. And I think also that's one reason that pre-med was really attractive to me. It was like, oh, here's a set path. I know what to do.
Hmm.
And, I think, kids are so smart. And some of us are really good at following instructions, right?
Yep.
And that can be a limit. When you're really good at following instructions, you're always looking for instructions to follow instead of thinking about, what do I want, or how can my values help me navigate this situation and help me make a decision that's really true and authentic to me, as opposed to fitting into someone else's expectations or someone else's instructions. And I think I if I had to do it all over again, I would have done it differently. I mean, I'm raising my own child now, and of course, it's like the hardest thing ever. And I'm just trying to let him be who he is, and I never really talk to him about, what kind of college do you want to go to, or what do you think you want to be when you grow up. Um, and he says things that are a little concerning to me sometimes. We live in Southern California, so there are like refineries around. And one time we were driving by one, and he was like, I want to work at that cloud factory when I grow up. Um, and of course, there's a lot to
The
unpack
cloud
there
factory.
too,
I love
thinking that a
it.
refinery is a cloud factory.
Yeah.
But I was like, I think we could do better than that. Let's not imagine that. Hopefully, refineries are not around when you are old enough to be working there.
Yeah. It makes me think of just like our K-12 system, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast specifically, is it kind of sets our kids up to follow those instructions, like you said, in this prescribed path with standardized tests and, everybody wanting to fill up their classes with APs and just kind of check the box to get to the next step. And we've talked about, other creative schools or environments where it really allows kids to have critical thinking and self-knowledge, which is something that's you're not going to find that on, a school's report of how well they're doing. But it's really what would have probably helped you and helped me and other people just kind of not flounder or not feel like they don't know themselves and what they want.
Yeah, and I
Allowing them
think
to
that
kind of
we
explore that.
probably would have taken the same kind of nonlinear journey, but we wouldn't have felt like failures while it was happening. And I think
Yep.
that confidence would have done so much for me at a young age. But I think you're so right. I think the school systems are rigid. They put students in boxes that they certainly don't belong in. It saps the creativity and uniqueness and a lot of the personal growth out of the period of time where those things should be emphasized, right? When
Yeah.
you've got an adolescent going through this period looking for their independence, trying to both fit in yet be themselves, it's such a difficult time. That's where we really need to be helping students learn how to think for themselves, understand their strengths, set goals, and build the skills to achieve those goals. But instead, we're marching them through this really standardized curriculum that is serving very few of them.
Yes, and not necessarily preparing our adults for the job
Yeah.
market the way it exists
Yeah. Or
now.
just, these kids for their young adult life,
Mhm.
let alone the workplace. Just they are going to have to make decisions for themselves. And of course, as parents, we want them to make good decisions for themselves, but we're not either equipping them with those skills or giving them the space to practice applying those skills. And I think those two things are really essential in adolescence.
So what do you feel like is your contribution to the solution here? Because obviously, none of us have the one solution for how to change the not only the entire K-12 education system, but our parenting. I mean, these are big things, but for your little slice of the pie and I mean, you're really working with students and families as they are navigating this very stressful process. So how do you sort of approach it with them that's different from, or maybe that honors that inner voice from you
Yeah.
and helps them kind of grow
Such a
in that
good
way?
question. Thank you for asking. So
Mhm.
there's sort of two pieces of this. One is let's get on the same page about our expectations, right? If you want your student to go and have this very standardized structure and end up in a career like financial services and have that clear path, there might be one like way to move through this system, right? And that's fine. I'm not here to judge, your choices. Maybe financial service is the thing that really lights your kid up. That's great. I've never heard that before, but maybe there that kids out there. Um, uh, but if parents are really interested in helping a student create a meaningful life for themselves, then we have to be willing to take a different path. And it may not be a well trodden path. It may be a path that you are clearing for yourself. And that can be scary. It can feel like, oh, well, if we do that, are we going to make it to the Ivy League or are we going to make it to a top 200 college? You might, but a top 200 college may also not be the right fit for whatever it is that your student wants to do, right? So we have to be able to put those rankings and those societal pressures aside if you really want to do the thing that serves your child's actual best interests. So that's the first thing, right? Like, let's get clear on expectations. The second thing we have to do is set our own definition of success and really commit to it. And that definition of success needs to be co created with a student. It cannot be mom or dad saying, you will do this, and that means success in our family. It's got to be tailored to a student's actual interests, strengths, skills, like personality and mindset, it's got to be something that really fits them. And of course, they're going through this tumultuous time of development, and their interests are shifting. Their bodies are changing. Their minds are like their brains are literally still growing. So you can't pretend that they're going to decide something when they're 13 and that's the thing that they're going to go after. But what we do at Signet is try to teach students this framework of understanding their values, understanding their skills and strengths, setting good goals for themselves. And this is not, it could be a 10-year goal, but usually it's a 3-month goal or a this academic year goal. And as they get to practice applying those skills and setting those goals, they internalize this reflective process where they know now how to navigate whatever the decision may be. Right. So really what we're doing at Signet, alongside the SAT prep or the college admissions, support, is teaching them that framework so that they can, I borrow this phrase from another parent coaching group. They say, so that they can enroll themselves into their own adulthood.
I love that. Okay, but this is really like a monumental task that you're undertaking, because it could be the first time that anyone has truly asked that 14, 15, 16-year-old what they want. And again, if that inner voice has been ignored because of the external expectations, or it's just the way we parent. We shuttle our kids from activity to activity. I am guilty of that. We have been to 6 activities in the past 2 days of this week, so I consider myself a part of this. And it's actually not me pushing my kids. These are things that they like to do, partly because of what I've learned through this work. But that said, it is part of our collective of just kind of sweeping things up, and just kind of going along with the big school of fish,
Yeah.
right? So when you get these kids, it's the first time that you're trying to separate them from their parents and really tap into what they want. I can imagine that causes some friction
It
sometimes.
absolutely
Would you
does. And we
say?
spend a lot of time with parents, making
Hmm.
sure they know that our work is going to be directly with the student, and we will keep them in the loop as much or as little as they want to be kept in the loop. But part of what we're doing is trying to help their student learn to think for themselves. And that might
Mm.
mean that they disagree with mom or dad from time to time. But if we can establish what those goals are and, get on the same page about what our process looks like with the parents, we establish a lot of trust there.
Yeah.
And so it kind of works like mentorship, right? I always tell my families, like, you don't have to work with us, that's fine, but get mentors in your kid's life, people that you trust that your kid is going to be open with. And then you won't have to worry about anything, right? There's so much that kids can learn from mentors in their life that they're probably saying the same things that mom and dad are saying. But of course, they have stopped listening to mom and dad. So you need other people that you can trust to give them, to surround them with these good messages, right? And, that's really one of our main roles here at Signet. And then because that friction does come up, we are just a warm hug for mom and dad for them to put their anxieties on, get their questions answered, talk through what some of their frustrations are. And in some cases we do say, this thing that's concerning you is more about you than your kid's doing great. They're really happy with where they're going, and we see them as on track for the kinds of academic paths that they want to traverse. And you had a different experience when you went through this process. I understand that you're worried, but I want you to interrogate where this concern is coming from, because if it's not serving your child, it's really hard. But this is the work of a parent, is like swallowing your pride and putting your own needs aside so that you can, provide the best opportunities for your kid. And so we do have to have those conversations sometimes.
Yeah, but I think that it's very honorable for you to attack it in that way, and really could be just sort of like a healing therapeutic process for everyone involved, because you're right. I mean, there's a lot of letting go that has to happen. We've parented our kids up until this point and, kind of driven the bus, and now it's their time. Literally you hand them the keys at 16. It's a little terrifying, but there's an analogy there too for the rest of their lives. So yeah, I think it's just really cool what you do. I think that there's just a lot of stress that comes along with the process. So to have you there as a mentor and to kind of help suss out like whose goals and expectations are they and how to work on that. I love that. I just want to pivot a little bit because the other thing that you talk about a lot, Sheila, is just kind of from a systems perspective, how, obviously our individual, parenting and what we want for our kids is one thing, but then there's all these systemic factors that have sort of like just contributed to the state of our education, higher education is today. And you wrote on a LinkedIn post a little while back. I'm going to read you this quote, and then you can tell us what it means if that's okay with you. um, you said, when you consider the systemic perspective, what individual burden can you put down, and what collective cause can you pick up? Can you tell us, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me about this. I love talking about the system. And sometimes I end up sounding a little bit like a conspiracy theorist, but I promise my opinions are very well researched and well evidenced.
I
Everything that
trust you on
we've been
that.
talking about is that system, right? The feeling that parents have where they're like, okay, I got to get my kid to like 25 different extracurriculars, and then we have to do X, Y, and Z so that they can go on to this school. That's part of the system that is encouraging those behaviors and encouraging the fear and anxiety and creating that sort of uber competitive, stressful environment where kids really feel like their entire futures are on the line when they take the SAT or they submit their college applications, right? This is just the beginning of their journey. And there's really not that much that they can do to mess up their entire academic and career trajectories in high school. I mean, there are things, right? But most kids are not going into those things. But parents are so worried that they're going to choose the wrong summer activity and then their life is going to be ruined. Like that's just not how it works. But it's the media focus on, a few select schools that are the most selective, right? But when we talk about, and I'll name my own alma mater, when we talk about Harvard all the time and the kinds of kids that do get in and don't get in, it makes people feel like college is unattainable. When Harvard is literally the most selective college in the world, some 97% of people who apply don't get in. But there are thousands of four-year colleges in the United States, and the average admissions rate is somewhere above 70% when you take a look at all of them, right? So there are colleges for everybody where you can get an excellent education and an excellent job afterwards and, pursue all the things you want to pursue. It's not just everybody has to go to the, 8 Ivy League schools, but the media's hyper focus on them makes it feel that way for everybody. Right. And then we start to think, oh God, we better start SAT prep in 9th grade. Otherwise we don't have a chance. Right. Please don't start SAT prep in 9th grade. That's really overkill. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this system. And a lot of people will say the system of higher education is broken. But the thing about systems is that they persist because they are working very well for somebody, even if the majority of people who interact with that system are not served by it. And that is absolutely the case with college admissions, right? So I really want families to see that the college admissions system is about colleges meeting their institutional priorities, right? They've got a revenue goal. They've got goals around growing certain majors, having a competitive athletic roster, having, the best orchestra in the region. And that determines the kinds of students that they are looking for. And that may not be your student, even if your student has a perfect score on their standardized tests and a perfect GPA and all the leadership positions, and we say it's not enough. That's not what it is. It's just not what they were looking for. But when parents see this as about their child, they think my child wasn't enough, or I wasn't enough. I didn't help my child be enough, right? And so I'm saying, put that away. That is not what this is about. And that is so detrimental to our kids' mental health and our parents' mental health as well. So much shame and guilt, right? But we see this mental health crisis in our youth, and so much of it comes from this academic pressure and the whirlpool of like rumors and the media stories about, the valedictorian and the perfect score that didn't get into Harvard or Stanford or whatever it is. And it's creating, some really bad incentives. And it's causing students to isolate themselves from each other because they don't want to share, oh, I got this internship or I'm doing this for the summer. They don't want to invite their friends along to say, I hear this all the time from our parents. Like, I'm afraid to tell people that we're working with you, not because I'm like ashamed that we're getting help, but because I don't want these other kids to be my kids' competition. Or I don't want all of your time to go to all of these other kids. I want to make sure my kid still gets time with you. Right? Literally have heard this from our clients. And I just think that is going to be the end of our society. If we can't change that. And if we stop seeing each other as competition and start to understand, okay, there are these institutions that are trying to fulfill their priorities, we can actually come together and start to change the system and say, we don't want this to happen. We want maybe an open admissions process or an automatic admissions process that a lot of states are piloting now, which is really successful in increasing college access for a lot of students, right? Or we think test optional is a good thing, or let's go test free, right? But if we're too busy fighting each other, we can't get organized to actually push those changes through. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say put down the individual burden and pick up a collective cause.
And I think that conversations like this reaching more and more people so that it becomes normalized that 97% of people who apply are not going to get in. Like, if you really wrap your brain around that. And also, I didn't realize we had 4,000 four-year colleges in the US. That's actually a staggering number. It doesn't seem like that because of US News and World Report. And, it just feels like there's this scarcity and we're all trying, fighting over this thing, but there's 4,000
Yeah.
colleges.
I mean,
There's something for everyone.
that's capitalism's playbook, right? I was
Yep.
talking to another really wonderful person who works in this space. Her name is Marie Bigham, and she was talking. She has an obsession with Nike sneakers. She's like one of these sneakerheads. And she was talking about it
Uh-huh.
just like, this Nike obsession she has, where she entered some lottery and she was up in the middle of the night
Oh,
to enter the
yes.
lottery to get these dunks. And, she knows they're not the best shoes out there. They're not going to like make her jump higher, anything like that. Not that she's even like a basketball player, but she just loves these shoes. And they create this atmosphere of scarcity. And that's how they, can justify charging such exorbitant prices and having such a rigorous process to get into, just to be considered, right? There's a whole marathon these kids have to run in order to do that. And people wouldn't stand for that unless they thought this is rare and it's special and
Mm-hmm.
it's worth fighting for.
Right. If it's rare, it must be
Right.
better. Also, I have a 14-year-old who plays basketball, and I'm well aware
Oh,
of the
the
Nike
shoe
sneakers
story.
app and the drops and all of
Yeah.
that. So, yeah, but it just contributes to that. Like, I want to
Mm-hmm.
win, but what do you win? A pair of sneakers that are like very
Yeah.
overpriced, but that's what it
Right.
is.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, Sheila, this has been so fabulous. I knew it was going to be fabulous because I think just weaving your own personal journey into now what you're doing to helping all of these families, kind of navigate this process is lovely. I was hoping you would tell us what book you think that everyone should read,
Yeah.
because we're compiling a list, and I think it's going to be a fabulous list. So, what's on
Well,
your
when
list?
you first told me that you were going to ask me this question, my instinct was to say Jennifer Brahaney Wallace is Never Enough. But I'm sure that's already on your list because everybody's been talking about it since it came out. If it's not on the list already, put it on. I'll give you a second one. It's by Ron Lieber, who is a journalist with the New York Times. He wrote a book called The Price You Pay for College. And
Mm.
it is fantastic. It's really calling into question, like, this is the biggest purchase that most families are going to make. It's like the cost of a house, but we know so little about the thing that we're purchasing and how to measure its quality or its
Mm.
durability. And so he goes through all kinds of questions that you could ask an admissions officer or a tour guide. It's overwhelming, but it really sends the point home, you really need to know what you're applying for. What is that prize that you're trying to win so hard? And then right size your efforts to the prize that actually makes sense for you. So it's a really great book.
Okay, I love that. We will add those to the list. Okay, well, and then lastly, where can people find you, Sheila, if they want to work with you at Signet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place. You mentioned my LinkedIn profile. You could just search up Sheila
Hmm.
Akbar. You'll find me. I post regularly and share a lot of resources there. You can also look at the Signet website, which is signeteducation.com. And those are probably the two best places.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for coming, Sheila, and it's just been a fabulous conversation. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Corey. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Forget What You Learned, hosted by me, Corey Greenberg. As always, our goal is to allow you to zoom out on the snapshot of your family's life and answer the question, are my kids thriving? We're here to inspire you to make those small and maybe big changes to answer yes. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Pacific Preparatory and Tutor Corps, sister organizations committed to educating students with an innovative and holistic approach in today's digital world. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave a rating and review. See you next time.